All right, everybody, welcome back. I know I'm dressed like a 12-year-old. I promise I am a real professor, unless it's the year 2030 and we've all been replaced by robots and sweater vests. But, today I want to mix things up a little bit. I want to change the approach that I've been taking. I want to replace some of these scripted, corny videos with some unscripted, corny videos. And I want to start off by talking a bit about when I was first learning Python, right? And I remember learning the syntax, and I remember trying to understand how programs were constructed. And, what made it difficult for me is this constant process of learning things that had no value, where I couldn't really connect the dots for what is the point of this, right? And it wasn't until I started building scripts that actually did something where it started to click for me, right? And so today what I'd like to do is actually build a program that does something. So if you've ever had the pleasure of eating at a restaurant in the US, you might know that figuring out the tip can be like solving the Da Vinci Code, like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind decoding Cold War secrets, or our boy Charlie with the papers in the yarn, right? And you might be thinking, yo, professor, it's 20%, just move the decimal point and double it, right? That's how you guys sound. Sure, that works if you have no friends, right? But I want you to close your eyes for a minute and imagine that you're like me and you're crushing it and you have 5 friends or four, say 4 friends. You have 4 friends. So the 5 of you are at whatever restaurant wants to sponsor my YouTube channel, and the check comes, and this beloved sponsor of mine doesn't split the check. Now you might be thinking, I go to college, I can divide by 5, right? Move the decimal and double it, right? We covered this. But then Kathy lets everyone know that she only ordered a salad, and Will did what Will does and drank 4 Long Islands. And suddenly you remember you barely had any guac. So that leaves you with only a few options. You can go to the bathroom for a very long bathroom break. You can blindly enable Will's drinking problem with a big tip. Or you can open Jupyter Notebooks and load up your tip calculator. And guys, I didn't just wake up with 3 friends. I got them by being the kind of guy that does option 3. All right, so if you were smart and you skipped this whole intro, we are going to build a tip calculator, and it actually won't solve the problem that I covered in the intro. All right, here we are. I suddenly feel very small and insignificant. Here is our task for today. We are going to build this tip calculator. It's going to start off very simple, right? But as we move forward in this series, we'll eventually get to programs that are a bit more complex. Our instructions, by the way, you can find this problem in the description. Our instructions are to start interacting with a user, right? And we want to gather information from that user stored in variables in our program, manipulate those variables, and then output them back to the user, right? So first, what we need to get from the user, we need to find out how much the total bill at the restaurant was, right? We need to find out, how generous of a tipper they are, right? And then we need to find out how many people are splitting the bill, right? And then we'll perform 3 or 4 calculations. We want to calculate the total tip that's owed to our server, right? Then we want to calculate the total bill that includes the price of the meal plus the tip that we just calculated. Then we want to find out how much is owed on a per person basis, and we might as well just split up the tip per person and the total bill plus tip per person. Then we're going to output all that information back to the user, but we don't want to just spit random numbers at them. So we'll contextualize the data within outputted strings. We'll use F strings to embed the calculated data into the strings that we are presenting the user, right? So it sounds like a lot, but this will be pretty simple. And after a few weeks of engaging with Python, you'll look back at a problem like this and think that it was ridiculously simple, right? So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and gather some information from our user, right? So let's go ahead and get in the habit of creating good comments that denote exactly what we're doing. So ask our user for information, right? And the first thing we need to find out is how much was the total bill, right? So I'm going to store this in a variable called bill. And as you guys know, we denote a variable by putting it on the left-hand side of an expression that has an equal sign, a single equal sign, which does not mean anything mathematical. It simply means that whatever I put on the right hand side of that equal sign is going to be stored inside the variable on the left hand side, right? And we'll start off by just writing a simple input which says enter the total bill amount, right? I'm going to pause here for a second. So there's a few things. The input function, as you know, is a basic function for interacting with our user, right? When we write an input function, it accepts arguments. One of the arguments it accepts is whatever prompt we're going to display to the user. So that's what we put in here. This is the prompt we're displaying to the user, right? Now, no matter what information they give us, it will be stored by default as string data, right? You guys have learned that string data is, think letters, right? It has no numeric value. So if I were to take this total bill amount, let's say it's $100, and let's say we have my 4 friends are with me, and we split this 5 ways, right? Well, and once I try to divide by 5, Python's going to get salty with me because it's going to say, hey, you can't take a string that has no numeric value and divide it by 5. It's going to return an error. So what we need to do is right here, go ahead and convert this to float data. Now, float data simply means it's numeric data, but it's not integers, right? It means we're allowing for decimal places, right? So we are going to go ahead and store this as float data. And this extra space here is just so that it doesn't show up too clunky to the user where their answer is being pushed right against my words. So we can take a look at how this works, right? We see enter the total bill amount, right? And this extra space is allowing a little room here. And when I put in 100, our program is done. It's taken that 100 and it's stored inside of bill. I can test this, right? I can go ahead and print bill, right? And we see we have float data, right? And it's storing 100, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. All right, so we create our first variable. Next thing we need to find out from the user is how generous they are, right? So let's create a variable called tip %. And again, it's going to be a float variable, right? Or float data. And we need the input function, and we need an argument inside of our input function, which will simply be enter the tip %. We might want to give them a little guidance on what we mean when we say tip %. So omit the % sign e.g15, right? Because if they put a % sign, when we go to convert that into a float variable, it's going to get confusing for Python. All right, so let's go ahead and test that everything looks okay. I need to close my quotes and let's go for it. Actually, I already see a mistake here. So as you can see, I open my quotations here and then I close them here, and then I'm reopening them here and I'm closing them here. It's a good chance for me to show why we have both double quotes and single quotes, right? Because this is a scenario where I am putting quotations inside of a string of text that I want my user to see. So I want my user to see the quotations, right? So let's go ahead and give this a run. Oh, we do have a problem right here. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and give this a run. The total amount, $100. And the percentage, we will call it 15. And both of these pieces of data have been converted to float data and stored inside of their respective variables. All right, let's move a little faster now. So we need to know how many people are splitting this bill. So the number of people, and this will be an integer. We're going to assume we don't have any partial people with us. And let's ask them, enter the number of people splitting the bill. 1, 2, there we go. All right, and we can test this out. $100, 20%, 5 people splitting the bill. Everything is running so far. Perfect. All right, so now let's go ahead and convert our, let's just call this calculations, right? All right, so first calculation we need to do is their tip came in as a whole number, right? So we need to go ahead and calculate the tip rate, right? Which is simply the tip percent divided by 100, right? So let's take a look at this. 125, right? And then let's go ahead and print what's in tip rate. And we see we now have it as a decimal, right? If we print what was inside of tip percent, it was a whole number, right? So we now have the decimal that will be a little bit easier for us to work with for the rest of our calculations. Now let's go ahead and calculate the total tip, right? And the total tip is what the entire party owes, and that's going to be the bill times tip rate, right? And I was thinking about just testing these out over and over again, but that will make for a very long video. So let's go ahead and write the rest of our program, right? Or honestly, what we could do, let's put this down here. More calculations, right? So now we can continue to test out our variables and see what's stored, right? All right, so our total tip is going to be $20. Right? The reason why I don't want this up here is every time I run this cell, I'll have to type in my data over and over again, right? Because it's going to run everything in the cell. Now that I'm down in a lower cell, when I run this, it's only running the code that I have in that cell. All right, so total tip has been created. There's $20 in there. Let's now calculate the total bill, which is simply going to be the bill plus total tip. And we can go ahead and run that and see what's inside of total bill. $120, right? Everything's working out just as it should. Tip per person is going to simply be the total tip divided by the number of people. And I will just go ahead and create our last variable, which is going to be the total per person, which is the total bill divided by the number of people. All right, let's go ahead and run this. We can test our last ones out. We can go ahead and test out tip per person. And $4 is owed per person. That checks out. And finally, total per person. That was $4 tip per person. Let's go ahead and print this. and $24 total is owed per person. All right, so everything is checking out so far. Just clean this up a little. So now let's go ahead and put in our output, right? Let's format this nice and pretty for our user. Output results. All right, so now we need to go ahead and remind ourselves how F strings work. All right, so if you don't know, an F string takes the value that's in a variable and just kind of cleanly embeds it into a string of text. Right? It's a really easy way of creating nicely formatted outputs. So to use an F string, we put the letter F, as you might guess, right before a string, right? The next thing that I want to show you are line breaks, right? Or I think sometimes they're called escape sequences. So this /n combination, what this does is it'll space out, it adds up just a blank line of space, right? So that the nice thing there is after we run these inputs, right, we don't want all of our data, all of this information all pushed together. This will make it more readable by kind of skipping lines, right? So that escape sequence, and then we'll go ahead and let the user know that the total tip amount, we'll put a colon, we'll put a space, we'll put a $sign. So this is all just part of our string, right? But now we are inserting our F string. We're using our squiggly brackets, and we want a total tip, right? Now, this is all you would need to do for your F string. The problem is we're dealing with, currency data, right? And the typical customary way that you would display currency data is with the decimal place rounded to 2 zeros, right? So to put in this specialized formatting within our F string, what we need to do is put in a colon here, which is letting us know, or letting Python know, that we are customizing the formatting of this variable. And then we are going to do .2f. So we're using the F formatting, and we're rounding to 2 decimal places, right? And close our bracket. So now what I'm going to do is copy this, save us a little time, right? And paste this here. And now we will go ahead and show the total bill. And the total bill, which includes tip, right? And now instead of total tip, we are putting in total bill, right? That makes sense. Let's print this out again. And now let's go ahead and show our user the tip per person, right? And our variable is, as you might guess, this is why it helps to give your variables names that make sense to you. So tip per person. Close my squigglies. Oop, didn't close my squigglies up here either. And finally, one more. Total per person. And total per person. All right, let's go ahead and put everything in one cell, right? And then we can play with it from there. Let's start moving all of these. I'm going to copy this, put this here. So copy all of this and put this here. And now let's run all of this together. Oh, and we already have a mistake. So our F string is not allowed. So I did not close out. Right here. Put this in the wrong spot. Whoops. I guess you guys are probably watching this thinking that I am a moron. It's true. Okay. did that 2 times. Let's try it again. All right, so our total bill amount, let's say, again, $100. The tip percentage, we'll stick with 20%. The number of people splitting the bill, I've got my 4 friends with me. All right, our total tip amount, $20, right? Formatted nicely with the dollar sign, rounded to 2 decimal places. Our total bill, including the tip, is $120. The tip per person is $4, and the total per person is $24. All right, so if you were able to work this out yourself without just following along in the video, but actually solve this problem, you are definitely ready to move on in this series. If you're struggling with this, that's a good sign that maybe we need to keep practicing here before we move on. Expect to struggle, right? I mean, you saw me, I made mistakes in this. I've been using Python for a long time. So expect to struggle. This is part of learning the language, right? But also make sure you understand everything that we just did before you move on, and make sure that you're able to solve these problems without simply copying somebody, right? Doing a monkey see, monkey do approach is a terrible way of learning. What you want to do is struggle with something, get that great feeling where you solve the puzzle, and then move on, right? So I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.